The heart. The heart is a hollow muscular organ within the pericardium in the middle of in the middle mediastinum. It is somewhat pyramidal in shape and it has three surfaces: the sternocostal anterior, the diaphragmatic inferior, and the base posterior. It also has an apex which is directed downward, forward, and to the left. The apex of the heart lies at the level of the left intercostal space, approximately 3.5 inches, 9 centimeters from the midline. Structure. The heart is divided by vertical septa into four chambers: the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles. The right atrium lies anterior to the left atrium. The right atrium lies anterior to the left atrium, and the right ventricle lies anterior to the left ventricle. The walls of the heart consist of three layers: the outer visceral layer of serous pericardium, the epicardium, the middle thick layer of cardiac muscle, the myocardium, the inner thin layer, the endocardium. The skeleton of the heart consists of fibrous rings that surround the atrioventricular, pulmonary, and aortic orifices and are continuous with the membranous upper part of the ventricular septum. Chambers. Right atrium. The right atrium lies anterior to the left atrium and consists of a main cavity and an auricle. At the junction of these parts is an external vertebral groove, the sulcus terminalis, which on the inside forms a ridge, the crista terminalis, the junction between the sinus venosus and the right atrium proper. The part of the atrium posterior to the ridge is smooth walled, whereas the interior of the auricle is roughened by bundles of muscle fibers, the musculi pectinati. Openings. The superior vena cava opens into the upper part of the atrium. There is no valve. The inferior vena cava, which actually is larger than the superior vena cava, opens into the lower part of the atrium. Here there is a rudimentary valve. The coronary sinus opens into the right atrium between the inferior vena cava and the atrioventricular orifice. It is guarded by a rudimentary valve. The right atrioventricular orifice lies anterior to the inferior vena caval opening. It is guarded by the tricuspid valve. There are also many orifices of small veins that drain the wall of the heart and open directly into the right atrium. Fetal remnants. In addition to the rudimentary valve of the inferior vena cava, there are the fossa ovalis and the annulus ovalis. These structures lie on the atrial septum, which separates the right atrium from the left atrium. The fossa ovalis is a shallow depression that is the site of the foramen ovale in the fetus. Before birth, oxygenated blood passes through this foramen from the right atrium into the left atrium. The annulus ovalis forms the upper margin of the fossa. Right ventricle. The right ventricle forms the greater part of the anterior surface of the heart and it lies anterior to the left ventricle. The right ventricle communicates with the right atrium through the atrioventricular orifice and with the pulmonary trunk through the pulmonary orifice. The approach to the pulmonary orifice is funnel shaped and known as the infundibulum. The walls of the right ventricle are much thicker than those of the right atrium. The internal surface shows projecting ridges called trabeculae carnae. There are three types of these ridges. Papillary muscles are attached by their bases to the ventricular wall. Their apices are connected by fibrous cords, chordae tendineae, to the cusps of the tricuspid valve. The ridges are attached at their ends to the ventricular wall and are free in the middle. The moderate band is a large ridge and it is attached at its ends to the septal and anterior ventricular walls. It conveys within it the right branch of the atrioventricular bundle, which is part of the conducting system of the heart. Simple prominent projections. Tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve guards the atrioventricular orifice. It consists of three cusps, the bases of which are attached to the fibrous ring of the skeleton of the heart. To their free edges and ventricular surfaces are attached the chordae tendineae, which connect the cusps to the papillary muscles. The cusps are the anterior, septal, and inferior. The anterior cusp lies anteriorly, the septal cusp against the ventricular septum, and the inferior cusp inferiorly. Pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve guards the pulmonary orifice, and three semilunar cusps of this valve are attached by their curved lower margins to the arterial wall. The open mouths of the cusps are directed upward into the pulmonary trunk. There are one posterior and two anterior semilunar cusps. The pulmonary sinuses are three dilatations at the root of the pulmonary trunk, with one being situated external to each cusp. The left atrium. The left atrium lies posterior to the right atrium. It consists of a main cavity and an auricle. The interior of the auricle possesses muscular ridges as in the right auricle. Openings. The four pulmonary veins, two from each lung, open through the posterior wall. There are no valves. The left atrioventricular orifice is guarded by the mitral valve. Left ventricle. The left ventricle is situated largely behind the right ventricle. A small portion, however, projects to the left and forms the left margin of the heart and the heart apex. The left ventricle communicates with the left atrium through the atrioventricular orifice and with the aorta through the aortic orifice. The walls of the left ventricle are 3 times thicker than those of the right ventricle. There are trabeculae carneae and two papillary muscles. However, there is no moderator band. The aortic vestibule is the part of the ventricle below the aortic orifice. Mitral valve. The mitral valve guards the atrioventricular orifice and consists of two cusps, one anterior and one posterior. Attached to the cusps are chordae tendineae and papillary muscles similar to those in the tricuspid valve. Aortic valve. The aortic valve guards the aortic orifice and, as with the pulmonary valve, consists of three semilunar cusps. One cusp is located on the anterior wall and two are located on the posterior wall. Behind each cusp, the aortic wall bulges to form an aortic sinus. The aortic sinus gives rise to the right coronary artery and the left posterior sinus gives rise to the left coronary artery. Heart sounds. The heart makes two sounds, lub and dub. The first sound is produced by the contraction of the ventricles and the closure of the tricuspid and the mitral valves. The second shorter sound is produced by the sharp closure of the aortic and pulmonary valves. The tricuspid valve is best heard over the right half of the lower end of the body of the sternum. The mitral valve is best heard over the apex beat, that is at the level of the fifth left intercostal space, approximately 3.5 inches, 9 centimeters from the midline. The pulmonary valve is best heard over the medial end of the second left intercostal space. The aortic valve is best heard over the medial end of the second right intercostal space. Conducting system. The conducting system of the heart is composed of modified cardiac muscle, sinoatrial node, pacemaker. The sinoatrial node initiates the heartbeat. It is situated at the upper part of the sulcus terminalis, close to the opening of the superior vena cava. It is usually supplied by the right coronary artery, but is sometimes supplied by the left. Atrioventricular node. The atrioventricular node is in the lower part of the atrial septum, just above the attachment of the septal cusp of the tricuspid valve. It receives its blood supply from the right coronary artery. Atrioventricular bundle. The atrioventricular bundle is continuous with the atrioventricular node above and with the fibers of the Purkinje plexus below. It descends behind the septal cusp of the tricuspid valve on the membranous part of the ventricular septum. On reaching the muscular part of the septum, it divides into two branches. The right bundle branch passes to the right ventricle and the left bundle branch passes to the left ventricle. The atrioventricular bundle is the only muscular connection between the myocardium of the atria and the myocardium of the ventricles. The terminal branches of the atrioventricular bundle spread out into the ventricular walls. There, they become continuous with the fibers of the Purkinje plexus. The atrioventricular bundle is supplied by the right coronary artery. The right bundle branch is supplied by the left coronary artery, and the left bundle branch is supplied by the right and left coronary arteries. Failure of the conducting system of the heart. The atrioventricular bundle is the only route by which the cardiac impulse can spread from the atria to the ventricles. Failure of the bundle to conduct the normal impulses results in alteration in the rhythmic contraction of the ventricles, or if complete bundle branch block occurs, complete dissociation between the atria and the ventricular rates of contraction. Blood supply of the heart, arterial supply, right coronary artery. The right coronary artery arises from the anterior aortic sinus of the ascending aorta. It descends in the right atrioventricular groove and sends branches to the right atrium and ventricle. It ends by anastomosing with the left coronary artery and in the posterior interventricular groove. Branches: the right conus artery, the right anterior ventricular branches, the marginal branch, the posterior ventricular branches, the posterior interventricular descending artery, the atrial branches. Left coronary artery branches, the anterior